You can't stand out here all night. Watch me. I'm not asking. Kian looked up, really looked for the first time, into the eyes of the man in the Navy uniform standing under the flickering platform light, and something in his chest folded quietly in on itself. The officer's face was unreadable, but his hand was already extended, palm up, waiting. I don't even know your name, Kian said. Rowan, the man answered, not moving his hand an inch. Now are you going to freeze out here on principle, or are you going to come with me? Neither of them moved for 3 long seconds. Then Kian's fingers brushed against Rowan's. Barely, just a graze. And something electric passed between them that had nothing to do with the cold. What happened next changed both of their lives. But to understand that moment, you have to go back. Back to 2 hours earlier, when Kian was just a stranger running for a train that had already left, and Rowan was just a man doing his job. The city never really slept, but at midnight it dreamed a little, quieter, dimmer, its noise thinning into something almost gentle. Kian Ashworth ran across the station concourse with his bag bouncing against his hip, his breath ragged, his shoes slapping against marble that had gone slick with the evening's rain. He could see the platform numbers blurring past him, 4, 5, 6, and he could hear, somewhere ahead, the mechanical sigh of doors closing. He didn't make it. He skidded to a stop at the very edge of Platform 6, just as the 1147 pulled away, its red taillights shrinking into the tunnel's mouth like the last ember of a dying fire. For a moment he just stood there, hands on his knees, chest heaving, staring at the empty track as if it might change its mind and come back for him. That's the last one, a voice said behind him. Calm, a little amused, but not unkindly so. They don't come back once they're gone. Trust me, I've watched a lot of people try to will them into reversing. Kian turned around, still catching his breath, and found himself looking at a man in a dark blue uniform, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of quiet, settled confidence that came from working the same job every night for years. His name badge caught the platform light, R. Calder, night duty officer. He had dark hair cropped close at the sides, tired eyes that still managed to look kind, and the faint shadow of a smile playing at the corner of his mouth, like he found the whole scene more entertaining than he probably should have. I had one job, Kian said, straightening up. Catch a train. One job. In your defense, the officer said, glancing at the departure board, the 1147 has been leaving 4 minutes early for about a month now. Management still hasn't fixed it. You're not the first person I've watched lose this particular race tonight. That's comforting. It's meant to be. There was something easy about the way he said it. Not scripted, not the tired customer service voice Kian had expected from a man in uniform at midnight. Kian found himself almost smiling despite the disaster of his evening, despite the cold seeping up through the platform and into his shoes, despite the missed train and the friend's couch he was never going to reach tonight. So what happens now? Kian asked. Do I just sleep here? The officer, Rowan, though Kian didn't know that yet, tilted his head, studying him for a second too long. It wasn't an uncomfortable look exactly. It was more like he was solving a small, interesting puzzle. Next train's not until 5:20, he said finally. That's 5 hours. You got someone to call? Kian thought of his phone, dead in his pocket since the charger cable had frayed apart that afternoon. He thought of his friend Marcus, who lived on the other side of the city and wasn't answering his door buzzer, even if Kian could somehow get there. He thought of his own apartment, locked, keyless, because he'd handed his spare set to his landlord that very morning for a repair visit he'd completely forgotten about until just now. Not really, no, he admitted, and there was something in the admission that felt heavier than it should have, like it wasn't really about the train at all. Rowan studied him for another moment, and something shifted behind his eyes, some quiet decision being made. He glanced at his watch, then back at Kian, then, almost reluctantly, said the words that would end up changing both their lives, though neither of them knew it yet. There's a break room upstairs. Staff only, technically, but it's warm, and there's a couch that's marginally better than concrete. A pause. You can sit in there until your train, if you want. I'm not going to make you freeze out here for 5 hours over a technicality. Kian blinked. You get in trouble for that. Only if someone finds out, Rowan said, and this time the smile reached his eyes fully, transforming his whole face into something warmer, something that made Kian's stomach do a small, unfamiliar flip. Are you coming, or are you going to stand on this platform being tragic all night? I wasn't being tragic. You were extremely tragic. It was very cinematic. I almost felt something. Kian laughed, a real laugh surprised out of him, and followed the officer through a door marked staff only, down a narrow hallway that smelled like coffee and old carpet, and into a small break room lit by a single buzzing fluorescent tube. There was a couch, exactly as promised, patched in one corner with silver duct tape, and a kettle, and a window that looked out over the dark tangle of tracks below. Home sweet home, Rowan said, gesturing vaguely. For the next 5 hours, anyway. And that was how it started. Not with fireworks, not with anything either of them would have called romantic if you'd asked them in that moment. Just a missed train, a small kindness, and two strangers about to spend a long night discovering they didn't want it to end. Rowan made tea nobody had asked for, in mismatched mugs that had clearly survived a decade of station staff turnover, and sat down across from Kian in a chair that groaned under him like it had opinions about being used this late. For a while, neither of them said much. Kian wrapped his hands around the warm mug and watched steam curl up toward the flickering light, and Rowan watched him with the kind of patient, unhurried attention that made Kian feel, strangely, like he was the only interesting thing in the entire station. So, Rowan said eventually, "Where were you running to?" "Before the tragic slow-motion train loss." "My friend's place. He's got a spare room. I was staying there for a few days while my landlord fixes my heating." Kian huffed a small laugh. Ironic, right? Fleeing a cold apartment, ending up on a cold platform. The universe has a sense of humor. A bad one, but a sense of humor. Rowan took a sip of his tea, grimaced slightly. Apparently even he thought it wasn't great, and set it down. "What do you do when you're not losing races against trains?" "I design things. Websites, apps, mostly freelance." Kian shrugged. "It's not glamorous. I stare at a screen and drink too much coffee, and occasionally something I make actually works the way it's supposed to." "That sounds like most jobs, honestly." Rowan leaned back. "I stand on a platform and tell people the train they're chasing already left. Occasionally, I let strangers sleep in the break room. Very high-stakes work." "You've been doing this long?" 6 years. Started when I was 21, needed something steady while I figured out what I actually wanted to do." A small, self-deprecating smile. "Turns out I never figured it out. I just kept coming back." "Do you like it?" Rowan considered the question longer than Kian expected, like it deserved real thought instead of a reflexive answer. "I like the nights," he said finally. "Everyone who's out this late has a story. Missed trains, missed connections, people running from something or toward something. You get to be a small part of it for 5 minutes, and then they're gone. It's strange, but I like it." That's a very poetic way to describe a night shift. "I contain multitudes," Rowan said dryly, and Kian laughed again, easier this time, and something in the small room seemed to loosen. The careful politeness of strangers softening into something that felt, unexpectedly, like the beginning of ease. They talked about nothing important. At first, favorite foods, terrible bosses, a shared and passionate hatred of a particular reality show neither would admit to watching regularly. Kian found himself telling stories he didn't usually tell people he'd just met. About his mother's insistence that he learn to cook before moving out. About the disastrous first apartment he'd shared with 2 roommates who turned his kitchen into what he still referred to as a war crime. Rowan laughed at the right moments, asked questions that meant he was actually listening, and somewhere in the second hour, Kian realized he'd stopped checking the clock. "Can I ask you something?" Rowan said, around 2 in the morning, his voice quieter now, the easy banter of earlier settling into something more careful. "Sure. Why didn't you call anyone?" "Earlier, I mean, you said you didn't have someone to call, but you had a friend's address. You could have called a cab, gotten a hotel, something." He wasn't accusing, just curious, in that quiet, observant way he had. "You look like you'd rather sit alone on a cold platform than ask for help." Kian was quiet for a moment, turning the mug in his hands. It was a fair question, and an uncomfortable one, and he found himself answering honestly in a way that surprised him. "I guess I'm used to handling things myself," he said. "Asking for help feels like—" He stopped, searching for the word. like admitting something. I don't know. It's stupid. It's not stupid, Rowan said, and there was something quiet and understanding in his voice that made Kian look up. I get it. Some of us aren't great at letting people in. Doesn't make it stupid. Just makes it human. Their eyes held for a beat longer than casual conversation required. Kian felt his pulse do something strange and quick, felt the small room seem to shrink around the space between them. And for a moment, neither of them looked away. You're doing it right now, though, Rowan added softly, breaking the moment with a small, crooked smile. Let me in a little. Guess the train officer job comes with unexpected therapy privileges. Don't get used to it, Kian said, but he was smiling too, and the warmth in his chest had nothing to do with the tea. By 4 in the morning, the tea had gone cold twice and been reheated twice, and the fluorescent light had developed a rhythm to its flickering that both of them had started, unconsciously, to sync their breathing too. Rowan's shift technically ended at 4:30, and when the time came, he didn't get up right away. My relief's late, he said, checking his phone. Not unusual. He's always late. He glanced at Kian. Your train's not for another hour. You could keep sleeping. Well, keep not sleeping, since you clearly haven't. Or I could walk you somewhere warmer. There's a place 2 blocks from here that opens at 5, does good coffee, terrible pastries. We could wait out the last hour there instead of this fluorescent purgatory. Kian should have said no. It was 4 in the morning. He had a train to catch. He'd just met this man 5 hours ago under circumstances that involve a badge and an unlocked staff door. But something about the offer, about the we in it, easy and unthinking, made the decision for him before his brain finished weighing the pros and cons. Yeah, he said. Okay. Outside, the city had gone strange and hushed, the kind of quiet that only exists in the hour before dawn, when even the streetlights seemed to be waiting for something. Rowan had changed out of his uniform jacket into a plain gray one that made him look younger somehow, less like an authority figure and more like, Kian struggled to name it, like someone he might have met at a party or a friend of a friend, or someone he'd have wanted to know longer than 5 hours. They walked close together against the cold, shoulders occasionally brushing, and neither of them moved away when it happened. The city around them was empty enough that it almost felt like it belonged only to them. The wet street reflecting streetlight in long orange smears, the occasional distant hush of a car passing 2 streets over, their own breath fogging in small white clouds between them. Can I tell you something embarrassing? Kian said, when they were maybe halfway to the cafe. Always. When you first came up to me on the platform, I thought you were going to write me a ticket for loitering or something. I was already composing my defense. Rowan laughed. A real laugh, surprised and warm, and it did something to Kian's chest that he wasn't ready to examine too closely. What was your defense going to be? Something about extenuating circumstances. A missed train and existential despair. Extremely compelling. I'd have let you off with a warning. You let me off with a break room and free tea, so I think we're already past warnings. Don't tell anyone, Rowan said, glancing sideways at him with a smile that felt, somehow, like a secret being shared. I have a reputation to maintain. Terrifying enforcer of train schedules. Your secret's safe with me. They reached the cafe as the first gray light was starting to bleed into the sky above the buildings, and Rowan held the door open, and their arms brushed as Kian passed through, and neither of them said anything about it, though both of them noticed. The cafe was small and warm and smelled like fresh bread, run by a sleepy-eyed woman who greeted Rowan by name and gave Kian a curious, assessing look that made him wonder exactly how many strangers Rowan had brought here at 5 in the morning. The answer, though Kian wouldn't learn it until much later, was none. Ever. He was the first. They sat at a small table by the window, coffee steaming between them, and the conversation that had felt easy in the break room deepened into something else entirely. The kind of talk that happens only in the strange, unguarded hours before sunrise, when exhaustion strips away the usual caution people carry. Can I ask you something now? Kian said, wrapping his hands around his cup. Turnabout's fair play. Do you ever get lonely? Doing this job? Nights, alone on a platform most of the time. Rowan was quiet for a moment, turning his own cup slowly on the table. Yeah, he said finally, and there was an honesty in it that felt like it cost him something to give. More than I'd probably admit to most people. It's a strange kind of lonely, surrounded by people all night, but none of them stay. Everyone's just passing through. You get good at being alone in a crowd. That sounds exhausting. It has its moments. He looked up, meeting Kian's eyes properly for the first time since they'd sat down. Tonight's been nice, though. Different. I don't usually. He stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. I don't usually let people into the break room, or walk them to cafes at 5 in the morning. You should know that. This isn't a thing I do. The admission sat between them, quiet and significant, and Kian felt his heartbeat pick up in a way that had nothing to do with the coffee. Why me, then? He asked, voice softer than he'd meant it to be. Rowan seemed to search for the answer, his eyes moving over Kian's face like he was trying to memorize something. I don't know exactly, he admitted. You looked, I don't know, like someone worth an exception. The words landed somewhere deep in Kian's chest, and for a moment the small cafe around them seemed to fall away entirely. The sleepy barista, the smell of bread, the gray light creeping through the window, until there was only the small table between them, and Rowan's eyes, dark and steady, and the sudden, dizzying awareness of how close they were sitting. Neither of them moved for a long moment. Kian's gaze dropped, involuntarily, to Rowan's mouth, and when he looked back up, he found Rowan watching him with an expression that made his breath catch, something open and uncertain and hopeful all at once. Kian, Rowan said quietly, and it was the first time he'd said his name all night, and something about hearing it in that low, careful voice made Kian's whole body feel warm. Yeah, your train's in 20 minutes. It wasn't what either of them wanted to say, and they both knew it, but the moment cracked open just enough for practicality to slip back in, and Kian nodded, throat suddenly tight, and looked away first. Right, he said. The train. Neither of them moved to get up. They walked back to the station in a silence that felt charged rather than awkward, both of them acutely aware of the space between their hands, close enough to brush, but never quite touching, both of them, though neither would admit it yet, hyper-conscious of every inch of distance and wanting, quietly and stubbornly, to close it. The platform was busier now, early commuters trickling in with their coffee cups and tired faces, the ordinary business of morning reasserting itself around them like the last 5 hours had been a dream neither of them was quite ready to wake from. So, Rowan said, stopping at the platform edge, hands shoved into his jacket pockets like he didn't quite know what to do with them. This is the part where you get on a train, and I go home and sleep through most of the daylight hours, and probably we never see each other again, because that's how missed train stories usually end. Is that how you want it to end? Kian asked, and it came out more vulnerable than he'd intended, but he didn't take it back. Rowan looked at him for a long moment. Really looked the way he had back at the very start of the night, like he was solving a puzzle he badly wanted the answer to. No, he said finally, quiet and certain. That's not how I wanted to end it all. He pulled a small notepad from his jacket pocket, the same kind he probably used to jot down complaints about delayed trains, and wrote something quickly, tore off the page, and held it out. Kian took it, fingers brushing against Rowan's for the second time that night, and this time neither of them pulled away immediately. My number, Rowan said, unnecessarily, since Kian was already looking at it. In case you ever miss another train. Or, even if you don't. I might start missing them on purpose, Kian said, and Rowan laughed, surprised and delighted, and the sound of it settled something warm and certain in Kian's chest. The train's arrival was announced overhead, a mechanical voice cutting through the moment, and Kian felt a small, sharp pang of reluctance at the thought of stepping onto it, of the night ending, of this strange, luminous 5 hours folding itself back into ordinary life. Hey, Rowan said as the train pulled in, brakes hissing. For what it's worth, this was the best night shift I've had in 6 years. Even though I ruined your break room protocol, especially because of that. The doors opened. Kian hesitated at the threshold, 1 foot on the platform, 1 foot toward the train, caught between 2 versions of the morning. The one where he simply left, and the one where something in him refused to let the moment end so easily. He turned back. Rowan, he said, and stepped forward before he could think better of it. Close enough now that he could see the flecks of gray in Rowan's dark eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off him in the cold morning air. Yeah? Rowan's voice had dropped low, uncertain and hopeful all at once, and neither of them moved away. Thank you. For the room. For tonight. You don't have to thank me for her. Kian didn't let him finish. He closed the last small distance between them and pressed his lips to Rowan's cheek, soft, brief, deliberate, close enough to the corner of his mouth that it was almost something else. Rowan went very still, breath catching audibly, and when Kian pulled back, their faces were close enough that either of them could have closed the remaining inch with barely any effort at all. Neither of them did. Not yet. That's for the train, Kian said softly, stepping back toward the doors, cheeks warm despite the cold. Call it a receipt. I'm keeping the receipt, Rowan said, voice rough, watching him step onto the train like he couldn't quite believe the last 5 hours had been real. The doors closed between them. Through the glass, Kian watched Rowan lift a hand in a small, private wave, and as the train pulled away, he pressed his palm briefly against the cold window, an unspoken promise neither of them could name yet, but both of them, somehow, already understood.